talk to you today about how to be an InfoSec dreamer. Basically, this is how to get your business bought in and partnering with you on your information security initiatives rather than trying to browbeat them or use FUD or any other kind of old school method for getting their cooperation with what you need to do. So how many of you can relate to this? Your CISO's getting ready to do the budgeting cycle and they're using Target, Sony, Anthem, what have you, major breach that has happened recently, and says, oh my God, we need more money. We don't have enough fun toys, tools, that kind of thing. Or what about this? Does the story of Sisyphus resonate with you? If you're not familiar with him, he was destined to push a rock up a hill for all eternity. And as soon as he would get the rock up the hill, it would roll back down and he would have to start all over again. And I think that's a really good metaphor for how security initiatives generally get pushed forward, or how it feels to be a security professional sometimes. You're continually pushing against the flow, working against gravity, pushing this giant boulder up this hill, only to have it roll back down and start over with the next security initiative. If these stories initiate with you, or resonate with you, you're doing it wrong. You're taking the old school approach to security. We need to do something different. So let's talk about how DREAMR came about, how we got here. So, the traditional methods of the past of getting business to cooperate and buy in just aren't working. Using FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, for those of you who are not familiar with what it is. Mandating, you're saying, I am security, hear me roar. This is the security policy and this is what you're going to do. Begging and pleading even, please put in this new firewall rule. Please put in this new security control. For the love of God, please do something. We need more controls. We need to get a handle on this. And these methods just, they may work in the short term, but for a long-term approach to getting the business bought into security and thinking about how security fits into the overall business model, it simply doesn't work long-term. It may work in the short term, but people quickly get to a point where they're fatigued from these kinds of approaches. And it really leads to cynicism in our industry. How many times have you been sitting around, at the bar or after a meeting with some of your colleagues and you're complaining about, oh, the business just doesn't get it. Oh, they're so stupid. If only I could do this or if only I could do that. It's really time to do something different. The definition of crazy, it's said, is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. We really need to come up with a way to get past the FUD and the mandating and the begging and pleading and really partner with the business. And so my colleague and I came up with the DREAMR framework. So each letter in DREAMR stands for a step in the process, and I'll walk you through that through the rest of the presentation. So here's the overview. D is for determining culture. So this is really getting an idea of what your organizational culture is like. Or maybe you have an overall organizational culture, but a different business unit has a different kind of culture. So it's really figuring out what the culture of that organization that you're trying to influence has. Then after you determine the culture, you need to reach out to people. You need to use your connections and your networking to move your initiative and your ideas forward. Next is education. But this isn't just about educating the business unit and the people that you're trying to influence. It's about educating yourself about what the business is doing and what are their critical processes. Next is accommodate. So this is where some security professionals seem to have some challenges, right? It's striking that balance between what's enough security, what's an acceptable level of risk, and having that conversation with the business unit on striking that balance. Next, you need to measure what you're doing. if you don't measure what you're doing, it's all based on, oh, it feels like we're more secure. It feels like we're doing a better job. And that's really just not a way to run business. And then lastly, you need to recognize. This is Psychology 101. You recognize and reward the behaviors that you want to continue. So those folks that are partnering with you and are getting buy-in and beating the security drum are the folks that you need to recognize and say, good job, thank you for that. And they will continue to do those things. So I'm going to dive in deeper into each of these now. And let's start with D. So first, we determine the culture. Now, this isn't a typical security core competency, right? So we took an interdisciplinary approach, and we started digging into organizational culture. And we ran across this guy, Charles Handy. He's done a lot of work on organizational culture, written a lot of papers about it in books. And so we read what he had to say. And basically, he breaks organizational cultures down into about 4 different categories: power, task, person, and role. So we'll walk through each of these and give you an idea of, you can make an assessment of where your organization fits into these. So first is power. So this is where there's a small group at the center that kind of holds the power for the organization. Next is task. So this is your basic matrix-based organization. You may have a lot of dotted line reporting, a lot of, crossing over to other teams, helping them out where you can, shared services, that kind of thing. There's the person-based culture. This is really, it's consensus-based. So you have to go to 57 different committees to get approval on your initiative, and you have to sit down with everyone from the VP or director of the organization down to the programmer or the admin that sits at the front desk when you come in. And then there's the role-based. And this is the typical, top-down, hierarchical kind of organization where you think of, there's the boss, and then it rolls down from there. And a lot of times direction comes directly from the top, and, people start implementing what is said. So how do you figure out which organization you fit into? Well, we have some clues here. So for the power organization, usually it's given to individuals, and it's really more about who you know rather than what you know. These are generally family-owned, early startups, very entrepreneurial kinds of organizations. And so, you may be friends with the founder of the company, and you rub elbows, and you go out for drinks, and you have lunch, and those kinds of things. And that's a power-based culture. Now with task, like I said, this is your basic matrix kind of organization. And so you'll probably have a close liaison among different departments or functions or specialties. And typically, this is a medium to large professional services organization, maybe accounting organization or a law firm, and a lot of consulting firms operate in this kind of culture. The person-based culture is interesting because they really reject formal hierarchies and formal reporting lines generally, and they just want to get things done. They exist basically to meet the needs of the organization, of their members. And so a lot of the times this will be a professional partnership or a small law firm or accounting firm, or a lot of nonprofits tend to use a person culture. And then the role-based is authority comes from your job title. It rolls down from the top. This is, think about government or very large public sector kinds of institutions. And a lot of banks are in this. So once you've determined your culture, what do you do now? Well, we kind of identified 4 different types or roles that people may fall into. Now, all of your organizations will probably have at least one of these. The key is to finding out, okay, so I figured out my culture. Who is the primary person or the best person in this culture to reach out to help me move the initiatives forward and help us do what we need to do? And so really it starts, with partnering with the business. And this starts the process You just got to find the right person. You really need to be networking. And networking is big in our industry, but you also need to be networking within your organization in order to get things done. And so you're not the big security person coming down the hallway with their latest initiative that they want to implement, right? You're basically informally expanding your security team because you're getting buy-in from other areas of the business that are not necessarily security professionals. So we created this handy-dandy matrix, so you can see that the cultures are across the top and the influencers down on the bottom. So who would be the primary role in each of these cultures that you reach out to? So in the person culture, you would reach out to a mover and shaker. This is the guy in the hallway that's like, hey, they always know what's going on and who to talk to, and they may not be the most technical person in the world. They may not be the one with a lot of decision-making power, but they know who to talk to, and they can get you to the right person. With the task-based culture, you're going to talk to an expert. So your experts are going to be your people that, they've been with the company forever. They might be the curmudgeon in the corner, or, they're the super rock star that was just recruited from the outside, and they wield a lot of influence. Because in the matrix-based organization, a lot of times the dots will come to them and the crossovers will come to them. And so if you're in a task-based culture, really identifying who that expert is in the organization you're trying to influence will help you move your initiative forward. In the role-based, it's going to be a manager or someone who's a manager-like position, like someone that you go to for coaching, or is, well looked upon as someone who's approachable and has good common sense and good business sense, someone who's really, really approachable. And then in the power organization, as you can imagine, this is, you're looking for the boss. And I'm not talking about either Bruce Springsteen or your direct next level manager, or even maybe the manager above them or director above them. What I'm really talking about here, these are the people that come down from on high and say, this is the strategy we're going to implement. This is the way forward with the business. This is what we're going to do. And so this might be a CIO, a CFO, a senior vice president, an executive vice president, really getting to the top of the hierarchy to drive down those initiatives. So I imagine some of you are saying, well, I'm just a mid-level manager. How am I ever going to talk to the CFO? I'm just an analyst. How am I ever going to get the CIO's ear? Well, this is a case where you use your networking skills and you find a mover and shaker to get you, to pivot off of, to get you to those connections. So you may not get a seat with the CIO, but if you know the mover and shaker that then maybe has other connections and bridges to the CIO, you can get your message to the CIO, right? So if you're ever not sure who the expert would be, or who the appropriate manager or coach, or even trying to get to the boss, really look for a mover and shaker, because these are the people that are going to be knowing who to talk to and making those connections for you. Okay, so we've determined our culture for the organization that we're trying to influence. We've determined who we need to reach out to. So what do we do next? We need to educate. And on this slide, I'm not talking about cramming the yearly security awareness CBT down the throats of the people that you're trying to get bought into your security initiative. That's just not effective. What I'm talking about here is really educating yourself about the business and raising your business acumen. People want to know that you understand what they're trying to accomplish and why their function exists. So you really need to learn from the business about the business. And this is the best way to do it, because if you're going based off of hearsay or, oh, I've been in the financial services industry forever, I know how X process works, that's not very effective. You really need to talk to the folks that are doing the work and have the processes that they're trying to move forward. So ask questions. Understand the history. How did they get to where they're at? People didn't just wake up one morning and go, I think it's a really great idea if I just put this, unsecured web server, public internet facing in the DMZ. I just think that sounds like a fantastic idea. For the most part, people don't just wake up and make these horrible decisions. It's a process to get there, and part of our job is to help educate them and help them make better decisions. But first we need to understand how they got to where they're at and why things are the way that they are. You really need to understand the business process that you're going to be impacting. I think a lot of times we as security professionals say, well, this is what you have to do for security. And, be damned, that's what's going to happen. And it's just really not effective. You have to know what the impact is going to be. And are there other things you can do, which I'll get into with the next slide. And then you really need to talk to them about, so what's holding you back? What's your hesitation about this? Did you have a poor experience at another company or with the previous security team? Has this been tried before and, wasn't effective? And what can we do differently this time? And really understand why they're hesitant and what their fears are. So then, after you have received the education, you provide education back to the business unit. Ways to do this are relating to them personally. Maybe get them talking about their kids and how they're scared about their social media presence, or, how to secure their home computers, those kinds of things. Really try and sell them on security and why it's important, but in a non-threatening, friendly way. Really start planting the seeds. And so here's a really good point, that this is not a one-time, call an hour-long meeting, sit down with folks and be like, all right, so I'm going to learn about your business, and then I'm going to tell you about your security, and we're just going to go about our happy way. This is really a relationship that you are building over time. This is going out for coffee with, the person that you're reaching out to. This is, being invited to some of their meetings and listening. Just listening to what they're trying to accomplish without interjecting, well, from a security perspective, we need to do this, or, that's just pants on head crazy, that kinds of thing. Really build those relationships over time. This is not an overnight thing that's going to happen. And if you do this right, you're informally expanding your security team. We had a speaker yesterday afternoon that said, oh, you have all the resources you need, right? No one? No? Yeah, me either. But if you can get people bought in through this process of learning about what they're trying to do and then planting those security seeds, you're going to informally expand the security team, because those people are going to start coming to you and asking you questions and bringing concerns to you proactively, so that you're not the big bad security guy that happens to overhear something, in the hallway that now you have to come and fix. So what are some of the questions you can ask? So Simon Sinek is the author of Start With Why. And he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Now, I think this works both ways with what we're talking about here in DREAMR, right? If we're learning about the business and understanding why they're doing what they're doing, it can go a long way for us to understanding how things got to be where they are and what kind of challenges we may need to overcome. So ask them, why? Why do you do this? Why does it work like that? How does this process work? What is the outcome? Other questions you can ask are, how do you receive work? Where does work go from here? What other processes and areas do you depend on? Now, this will be good because you can figure out other folks that you need to talk to. If you are talking to business group A and they're trying to accomplish something, but the security control that you want to implement is then going to make the downstream process a little bit slower, that could be a big problem. If we're talking about something like trading stock, the additional delay of 1 second could make a big impact on profit from selling stocks. or it could make the buy price higher. And so really understand not only the process that you're focusing on right now, but what other processes are impacted. What is the downstream effect? Okay, so we've determined our culture. We've figured out who we need to reach out to, using a mover and shaker to get to that person if necessary. We've sat down with the business and we've really increased our business acumen, and we've learned what they are doing and how they are critical to the business. So what do we do now? We need to accommodate. And this, again, is an area where I feel like security professionals aren't always willing to take the stand of secure enough, right? And it's really about balancing security versus the risk. And you have to keep in mind that there are many different ways that you can deal with risk. It's not all about eliminating risk 100% all of the time. You can mitigate the risk, you can transfer the risk, you can reduce the risk, you can even accept the risk. Now, I know personally for me, that is a concept that makes me very uncomfortable, and it tends to get me pretty fired up, and this is an area that I need to work on. But, you know, if you've adequately explained the risk to the appropriate level in the organization that can make the risk acceptance on behalf of the business, then they're allowed to make that decision. If you've adequately explained it, you've described the impacts and what could happen if a risk is not mitigated or reduced or transferred, and they want to accept it, well, you've done your job. Just make sure you document it really well. Now, if you are willing to do some accommodations, this gives you some quick wins, right? And it really gives you a foot in the door to continue the ongoing relationship and ongoing conversation about security. And you may be able to circle around later and get them to reevaluate this risk acceptance that they've done. So this accommodation is really key to solidifying the partnership, bless you, with the business that you're trying to influence. Okay, so I think people are going, whew, I've determined the culture, I know who to talk to, I've learned all about the organization, I have this great business acumen, I have accommodated people, I am okay with risk acceptance, I am done. Well, I have news for you, you're not done. You really need to measure what you're doing. It always comes back to metrics. This is how you demonstrate effectiveness. So you've built these really great relationships, but you also need to measure what you're doing from a security program perspective. If you can demonstrate to the business how you are providing value in an empirical, quantitative way, that's going to take you really far. So you really need to figure out what is important. And not just from a security perspective. What is important to the people that are making the decisions, your board, your CIO, your CEO? What do they want to know about your security program? So you're going to have your operational metrics. Oh, we worked on this many tickets this week, and we opened up these number of new risks and that kind of thing. That's not always what upper leadership wants to know about. So you need to have a conversation about what is important to them. What do they want to know about their program? How do they, a lot of times it'll come down to, tell me how we are more secure today than we were yesterday. Okay, well, how do you measure that? And so you need to dig down into the conversation more and really drive at what they're wanting to know about the security program. Now, a key thing about metrics is to make sure that you're doing it consistently. I've been part of organizations in the past where the metrics that they were measuring either changed every month or the method in which they were gathering the same metrics changed every month. And so you weren't able to do trending or benchmarking against other verticals or industries in your same vertical, right? And this is key. Executives want to know how they measure up to similar organizations. And so there's a lot of things that you can reach out to. Verizon does the DBIR every year. Tripwire has acquired Encircle. They have some benchmarking technology out there. There's a lot of things that you can do here, but you really need to make sure what you're doing is consistent and you're measuring it in a consistent way. And if you're pulling metrics on a Friday afternoon and all of a sudden you start pulling them on a Monday afternoon over a different time period, that's like apples and elephants. How do you figure out what's going on here? And then you need to communicate it back in a way that resonates. So then we get to the end and we talk about who were we able to partner with? Did you really make an impact with a mover and shaker, or did they make a connection for you to really start moving your initiative forward? You really need to recognize the people that helped you get buy-in, partnership, and movement. And you need to do it in a way that resonates with them. Some people really respond really well to public acknowledgement. You pull them up in front of the department meeting or the all-staff meeting, and you're like, oh, Joe did a fantastic job. If it wasn't for him, we would have never gotten, this initiative move forward. Other folks, that makes them not want to help in the future because they don't want to be pulled up in front of a bunch of people. They're very introverted. Sometimes an email to them or, copying their boss or a gift card or taking them out to coffee resonates better with them. So you really need to understand the people that are helping you and how to recognize them in a way that resonates with them and makes them want to continue to help you. So we've talked about the different steps in DREAMR. We've determined the culture. We figured out who to reach out to. We've done education both ways. We've made accommodations. We've measured our program. We're communicating in a way that makes sense. We've recognized the folks that have helped us to get there. That's the DREAMR framework in a nutshell. And now people might be thinking, okay, this is all really great things to talk about, but show me how this really works in the real world. So I have a case study for you. This comes from one of my previous companies. Patching was a real issue in this company. Not just application patching, but OS patching. They just did not want to do it. And we had one business area in particular that was just putting up a fight month after month after month about doing patches. This was not the 90s or the early 2000s. This was 2013. And so we had this business unit. It was insurance operations. I worked for an insurance company previously. And they were not bought into patching. And we tried mandating. We tried doing the big scary, a 0-day could come out. We could be totally owned. You have to patch. And it just wasn't working. So then we started asking questions. And we figured out that productivity was being impacted. Now, some of you might be going, patching, how, it's a simple reboot, 3-minute, apply the patches, maybe 30 minutes at worst. How's that impacting productivity? Well, the insurance operations folks worked in a call center. And we were putting people, because we had problems with some of our machines. They were this older XP build with full disk encryption, and boot times were literally 33 to 48 minutes, depending on the day. And so if you can imagine one reboot, and sometimes with patching there's 2 or 3 reboots, how long we're putting a person out of commission from being able to answer the phone, which means there's longer wait times, which means we have pissed off customers, right? So we were getting poor compliance. It was really a long process, and people just didn't want to be a part of it. So my colleague Ben and I started thinking, okay, let's try the DREAMR approach here. And so we identified our culture. It was a task culture, very matrixed organization, lots of dotted line, reporting relationships. Excuse me. And so because it was a task culture, we reached out to an expert in the business unit. So as we're having these conversations about insurance operations and patching and all of these different things, this name kept coming up, Bonnie. Bonnie knows this. Talk to Bonnie. Go talk to Bonnie. She knows about that. Bonnie's the one you have to talk to. And what I'd like to point out is Bonnie was not a manager. She wasn't a director. She wasn't a VP. She was a senior analyst in the insurance operations group. And so we sat down with Bonnie and we learned about what's happening in insurance operations. Why is there this pushback on this basic security control of patching? I mean, my goodness, we've been doing it since the early 2000s on a regular basis. I mean, how long has Microsoft had their Patch Tuesday cycle? You know, this is Security 101. What is going on here that we are not getting this under control in 2013 in this insurance company? And so and then after we learned about, you know, that they're a call center, and we took into account how long the reboot times were and how long that put someone out of commission, we started to understand. And we're like, oh, we're making a real impact to the business and the bottom line. If we have pissed off customers, they're going to tell, you know, 10 other people, and that's going to drive our net promoter score down. And then people aren't going to want to buy insurance from us. And it was a poor customer experience. So after we learned about all that, we started educating Bonnie about why patching matters. And we said things like, you patch your home computer, right? Oh yeah, patches download automatically, it reboots in the middle of the night, I don't even have to worry about it. Okay. What happens, you know, what could happen, or what's a story that has been maybe in the news recently that we can talk about? And this isn't talking about FUD, you know, to get her all scared. It was really like, this is a concrete example that's happened recently that could lead to very bad things in our environment. So then we talked about how can we accommodate them. Well, we came up with a couple of things. One, we really tailored our communications. We had a generic communication that went out to the entire organization that said, hey, it's you know, a week after Patch Tuesday, and we're going to go ahead and patch your system and reboot it. Be ready for it. So we really tailored our communications to the insurance operations group. This patch is coming out. This is what that means. Really tried to make it in non-techy, very understandable language. And then we worked on timing accommodations with them. So we would work with the groups to say, okay, this set of laptops or computers is going to be patched on Tuesday at noon, for example. So send those people to lunch at noon. That way the reboot isn't going to affect them because they're at lunch anyway, they're not on the phone. And the other thing we did here, and it'll probably sound a little scary to some of the folks in the room, is we gave them an opportunity to proactively reboot their systems before we did it for them. And so we gave them a 5-day window after the patches were made available where they could proactively go out and go, okay, I'm going to patch my computer now. I'm getting ready to take a break. It's end of the day. It's first thing in the morning, lunch, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and patch now. If after 5 days they hadn't worked on proactively patching, we patched for them and rebooted them. And so that gave them some flexibility to plan that, you know, 30, 40, 45-minute reboot time. And that is not hyperbole. We timed it. It was between 33 and 48 minutes on any given day that it would take to come back to being operational from a reboot on those systems. So then we started doing reporting on malware infections. And so this is where the metrics kicked in, right? And so we showed, after we made some timing accommodations and had that conversation with insurance operations, we showed that our malware infections were dropping, compliance with patching was going up, and we were able to report on the average number of vulnerabilities per host. And that number dropped by half in just a couple of months. We went from something like 16 exploitable vulnerabilities per host on average to like 7.5 on average in just a few months. It was like a 3-month time period. And then we provided this reporting to the business units, their management, and then it eventually rolled up to our risk function and our CIO. But we had different levels of granularity and different levels of reporting on that. And then we recognized Bonnie. Because without Bonnie sitting down and teaching us about the business unit and the business process, we would have never gotten to where we were. We still would have been Sisyphus, pushing that rock up the hill, trying to get the patching done, not making any progress. And it was because of Bonnie that we were able to be successful. And so we recognized her. Now what resonated with Bonnie is she was a coffee drinker. And she really looked for validation from her boss and recognition. So not only did we buy Bonnie a Starbucks gift card, we also sent a nice email and copied her senior vice president on it so that her boss, Sandy, was aware of the great work that she was doing and how she really partnered with us and helped to make the organization more secure overall. So this is the DREAMR life cycle. You know, after you've determined your culture once, you may not have to do it again, but you may be working with a different business unit who may have a slightly different subculture. Or maybe your organization has gone through some change recently. You've been acquired, you've sold off a business unit, new leadership has come in, and there's been an impact on your culture. So you may want to revisit this step periodically. But really, once you've determined your culture. Yes?
Is there like a dominant culture that you should focus on, or factors in certain priorities? In an IT organization, for example, they have an expert culture that goes to the administrators and get things done. But they may be a small, hybrid company where the boss is there as well. You can get traffic with the boss.
Yep.
When you select that, how do you work through that?
Did you say a power-based culture?
Well, I think in terms of if you're trying to get things moving within the IT organization itself, it may be more of a task.
Mm-hmm.
The expert is the administrator.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you're trying to get the work done. But the organization as a whole is a privately owned organization where
Maybe power or entrepreneurial kind of thing where it's centered.
you focus on that subculture and just try to go right into IT and get it done, or would you use the organization's overall culture and try to find the fault?
In that situation, I would use the task culture and start with the expert. Because if you can get the expert bought in, then you have someone on your side to then go make the case to the boss, right? And there's power in numbers. And so
how do you rank them? Do you always would you choose to partner with the expert to go to the boss, or would you choose just to go to the boss to partner and don't go to the expert?
I think it depends on each individual situation.
I'm sorry, if it hasn't been done, take me through that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's an excellent question. We just haven't really thought about it in those terms yet, and so I think that's some more work that we could do. But really, I would say starting off with.
I do a case study and if it fails, I can
That's okay. Yeah, my Twitter handle's on the front if you want to call me out on social media. Let's talk more afterwards because I think this is a really good conversation. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, right.
hearing that too, because there's more of a root cause analysis of where's the true root cause, which is within a certain subculture, that's the one you're going to target first, or if you have anyone else in the other cultures on your side.
Right, right. Power in numbers. So really, this is a cycle that you'll keep going through. And you can start in a different place every time, you know. I mean, it may be silly to start with recognition at the end, but, you know, some people eat their dessert first. So what questions can I answer? All right. Thank you very much for your time.